Chapter 9, The Leech. This is all about Roger Chillingworth. So, Roger Chillingworth, just to remind you, and this is what Hawthorne is doing on purpose here, has another name. Remember, he's Hester Prynn's husband, which its former wearer had resolved should never be spoken. So I think it's important to realize here that because when he shows up in town, Hester Prynn is standing before everybody because of her sins, there is nothing but contagion or dishonor that would be associated with anyone related to Hester Prynn. So he had resolved not to be pilloried beside her on her pedestal of shame. He chose to withdraw his name from the roll of mankind, and as regarded his former ties and interest, to vanish out of life as completely as regarded by his former ties and interest, to vanish out of life as completely as if he indeed lay at the bottom of the ocean. So remember, he had been missing, like had trouble getting to the colonies and got captured by Indians and spent a good deal of time in captivity. So for all anybody might know in England or in the colonies themselves, he's dead. And so he decides to let that be kind of the story, that, he's going to just strike his name, however you do that, and not ever claim his own identity and to become Roger Chillingworth. So we know this already, but I think it makes sense to just remember, he doesn't want to be associated with her. And there's also the issue, he was an educated man in England. People might wonder where he is. He decides to let everybody think he has just died when he was crossing the ocean to come there. So he presents himself as a physician because he genuinely has skills that he did learn from the Indians. Skillful men of the medical and chirurgical profession were of rare occurrence in the colony. So they did not have very many men who came to the colonies who were doctors. And of course, being a doctor in those days was sort of an unusual, maybe inconsistent practice. Certainly here in the Puritan colony, being a doctor is more about being a religious healer. A lot of them are using sort of religious beliefs to heal people. It's not necessarily science. So at all events, the health of the good town of Boston, so far as medicine was aught to do with it, had hitherto lain in the guardianship of an aged deacon and apothecary whose piety and godly deportment were stronger testimonials in his favor than any that he could have produced in the shape of a diploma. So prior to Roger Chillingworth, they had one doctor in town who was really more of a religious man than he was an educated doctor. There was also one surgeon who really didn't do any real surgery. It says all he really had was a razor, which is disturbing even to think about. So I apologize for this messy annotation here, but basically Roger Chillingworth had no competition in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He was clearly more skilled, even though he's somewhat self-taught. I mean, he's a smart guy, so his self-teaching is probably legitimate, and he was also taught by Native Americans who had genuine skills. So he comes in with this wealth of information, and people are impressed by him. This learned stranger was exemplary as regarded at least the outward forms of religious life. So he is showing them that he is a believer in God. He is following their behaviors in terms of how they worship. And early after his arrival had chosen for his spiritual guide the Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale. So he openly tells people when he joins their colony that he is going to study religion and learn it from Mr. Dimmesdale. The young divine, whose scholar-like renown still lived in Oxford, this is Mr. Dimmesdale, was considered by his more fervent admirers as little less than a heavenly ordained apostle, destined, should he live and labor for the ordinary term of life, to do great deeds. So because of Dimmesdale's education at Oxford, everyone really does believe he is a top religious scholar and that he will do great things in his career. So they're happy to have Roger Chillingworth studying with him. However, as was mentioned before, the health of Mr. Dimmesdale was failing. And they're going to reference again, besides the fact that he's very earnestly committed to his work, perhaps like he's working too hard and that's why he's sick, but he's also devoted to the fasts and vigils of which he made a frequent practice in order to keep the grossness of this earthly state from clogging and obscuring his spiritual lamp. So we're going to get more details about this as time goes on, but fasting means he's not eating. There are times when he doesn't eat or drink. Vigils, like maybe he's not sleeping. We're going to get some more details of what sort of things people would do if they were religious to sort of honor the afterlife and acknowledge or atone, honestly, for their sins. Some declare that if Mr. Dimmesdale were actually going to die, it was cause enough that the world was not worthy to be any longer trodden by his feet. Like, the world must be changing. He himself, on the other hand, with characteristic humility, avowed his belief that if Providence should see fit to remove him, it would be because of his own unworthiness to perform its humblest mission here on earth. So he's leaving it up to God. Dimmesdale's like, if I'm not good enough, if I'm meant to die, it's because I'm not good enough to be here. With all this difference of opinion as to the cause of his decline, there could be no question of the fact everyone agrees he's getting sick. His form is emaciated, his voice is weak, and it sounds like it's like he's an old man. And again, it references that he's putting his hand over his heart all the time. That indicates maybe he has pain. So it makes you wonder, is he having a heart condition of some sort? So clearly he is sick. So the townspeople decide that he needs to have Roger Chillingworth with him because he needs like the care of a physician. And they also start to think about Roger Chillingworth in terms of his role in like God's plan. So such rank in the learned world had he come hither, like why? They start to question, the townspeople question, like, he's so smart, Roger Chillingworth is. He acts it. I mean, he is legitimately so well learned. He's so smart. Why would he come here? That's one question that they have. They kind of like are curious about him, and they start to become suspicious on two different sides. So in answer to this query, a rumor gains ground that heaven had sent this doctor, Roger Chillingworth. He had come from a German university bodily through the air, is what they believe, and that he was just placed there at the door of Mr. Dimmesdale's study. So some people in town believe that Roger Chillingworth was sent by God literally through the air to Mr. Dimmesdale to help him get better. That's what some people think. He was sent by God. On the other hand, some other people think that, perhaps he's not. Maybe he's evil. But in the meantime, Dimmesdale refuses any medicine. He keeps saying, I don't need medicine. And the question is, how could the young minister say so when with every successive Sabbath, he's paler and looks more sick? They start to wonder, is he tired of his job? Is he suicidal? Does he want to die? Does he have depression? These are the things that people start to think. Now, they don't think about, does he have depression? Like, that's something we would say in 2026. But, they're wondering, like, is there something wrong with him? These questions were solemnly propounded to Mr. Dimmesdale by the elder ministers of Boston. So like a Mr. Wilson would say, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so sick? And they're sort of in charge of dealing with him on the sin of rejecting the aid which Providence so manifestly held out. So like they're wondering, why aren't you taking the advice of Roger Chillingworth? It seems to them that God sent Roger Chillingworth to help Dimmesdale get better. And Reverend Dimmesdale said, were it God's will, I could be well content that my labors and my sorrows and my sins and my pains should shortly end with me, and what is earthly of them be buried in my grave, and the spiritual go with me to my eternal state, rather than you should put your skill to the proof in my behalf. So it's like, God will take care of me, is basically what he's saying, and what's meant to be for me will be. And Roger Chillingworth is trying to convince him otherwise. He says, youthful men, not having taken a deep root, give up their hold on life so easily. He's like, this guy is young and naive. He doesn't know what he's saying, basically. And saintly men who walk with God on earth would fain to be away to walk with him on the golden pavements of the New Jerusalem. So he doesn't, as he gets older, or as people get older, Roger Chillingworth is reasoning, they care more about living. And perhaps because Reverend Dimmesdale is young and naive, he doesn't recognize how important life is and that he should try to be healthier. Nay, rejoined the young minister, were I worthier to walk here, I could be better content to toil here. So I would be happy in my life if I felt I was worthy. So clearly this is brought on by his own conscience, is what I would say about Reverend Dimmesdale. Not only the disease interested the physician, but he's strongly moved to look into the character and the qualities of the patient. This means like the psychology of the man. He wants to understand him more deeply. For the sake of the minister's health, Roger Chillingworth takes him on long walks. Well, that's a good thing. They walk along the seashore, they go into the forest, and while they're walking, they talk. There was a fascination for the minister in the company of the man of science, in whom he recognized an intellectual cultivation of no moderate depth or scope, together with a range and freedom of ideas that he would have vainly looked for among the members of his own profession. So Dimmesdale really appreciates the intellect of Roger Chillingworth. He likes having sort of like, a man of equal intelligence to talk about things. In truth, he was startled to find this attribute in the physician. Mr. Dimmesdale was a true priest, a true religionist, with the reverential sentiment largely developed, and an order of mind that impelled itself powerfully along the track of a creed, and wore its passage continually deeper with the lapse of time. In no state of society would he have been what is called a man of liberal views. So this is describing Dimmesdale. He is a conservative, religious man. We can assume that Roger Chillingworth perhaps is not. It would always be essential to his peace to feel the pressure of a faith about him, supporting while it confined him within its iron framework. Nonetheless, however, though with a tremulous enjoyment, did he feel the occasional relief of looking at the universe through the medium of another kind of intellect than those with which he habitually held converse. Like, he likes the fresh perspective of Roger Chillingworth's mind. It was as if a window were thrown open, admitting a freer atmosphere into the close and stifled study where his life was wasting itself away amid lamplight or obstructed day beams and the musty fragrance, be it sensual or moral, that exhales from books. So his world is getting bigger by talking to Roger Chillingworth. Thus, Roger Chillingworth scrutinized his patient carefully. So he's definitely paying attention to how he responds to him. Wherever there is a heart and an intellect, the diseases of the physical frame are tinged with the peculiarities of these. This to me sounds like a statement of universal truth, that physical illnesses can come from the heart or the mind. I think this is interesting. In Arthur Dimmesdale, thought and imagination were so active and sensibility so intense that the bodily infirmity would be likely to have its groundwork there. So he believes that his illness is coming from his emotions, from his psychology, basically. So Roger Chillingworth strove to go deep into his patient's bosom, delving among his principles, prying into his recollections. He's kind of acting like a therapist in probing everything with a cautious touch, like a treasure seeker in a dark cavern. I marked this for a good reason. Few secrets can escape an investigator who has opportunity and license to undertake such a quest. So remember what he said to Hester? Roger Chillingworth said, I will find out who is the father. This is a secret he's going to unearth, and this reminds me of that. It says here, Roger Chillingworth possessed all or most of the attributes above enumerated. So he's clearly good at sort of talking to people and helping them express their feelings. Nonetheless, as time went on, a kind of intimacy, as we have said, grew up between those two cultivated minds, which had as wide a field as the whole sphere of human thought and study to meet upon. They discussed every topic of ethics and religion, of public affairs, of private character. So it's like they talk about everything, but still, Roger Chillingworth had his suspicions that even the nature of Mr. Dimmesdale's bodily diseases had never fairly been revealed to him. So like with all this talking, Chillingworth still can't quite figure it out. He's still a mystery. He's still a puzzle. After a time, a hint from Roger Chillingworth, the friends of Mr. Dimmesdale effected an arrangement by which the two were lodged in the same house. So it's just interesting to me. These townspeople do a lot of meddling. They get themselves in everyone's business. The town people decide that Roger Chillingworth should move in with Mr. Dimmesdale to be like his physician in all moments, basically. And so that's what happens. He does move in. And it's because Roger Dimmesdale doesn't have a wife. So this hasn't been directly said, but we can assume it so far. There's no wife here. He is a single man. He's allowed to marry. It's not like a Catholic priest who is not allowed to marry. He is allowed to marry, but he hasn't found anybody. So they sort of chalk it up to like he's being celibate because of his church discipline. Probably Dimmesdale also sort of sends that message. So instead of having a wife, there is a pious widow. So pious means very religious person. To be very pious is to be very religious. A widow is in the home. So there is like a woman looking after him in terms of making meals and doing laundry and things like that. So these two friends, now Dimmesdale and Chillingworth, live together, and this widow kind of looks after them. Dimmesdale lives at the front of the house where there's sun there, and he has a study where all his books are, and he does all his reading. And then on the other side of the house is where Chillingworth has his laboratory and study, and he's literally making medicines there. I mean, he is truly a doctor practicing for helping other people in town. So by living so close together, they're kind of coexisting, but they're also snooping both ways. I would say we can assume here that both of them are paying attention to what the other is doing. Reverend Dimmesdale's best discerning friends really want him to become healthy, but another portion of the community had begun to take its own view on this relationship between Dimmesdale and the mysterious old physician. So remember, I said that earlier, everyone first said that Chillingworth was sent by God. Well, as time goes on, some people start to say, maybe he's sent by Satan. This whole section here is, maybe he's working in black magic, and they remember that, Indians maybe were savage, and that some of the things that the Indians did were considered black art. And so there's sort of now like tension in the community, like, was he sent by God or was he sent by the devil? That's what starts to go on here. These widely diffused opinions that the Reverend Dimmesdale, like many other personages of special sanctity, was haunted by Satan himself in the guise of Roger Chillingworth. Maybe he's getting so sick because the devil is working on him. That's the other side of this story. So the townspeople just keep watching in anticipation and worry. The people looked with an unshaken hope to see the minister come forth out of the conflict transfigured with the glory which he would unquestionably win. So they start to see his health as like a battle between God and the devil, and they are rooting for Dimmesdale to win this battle. Nevertheless, it was sad to think of the perchance mortal agony through which he must struggle. So like he's struggling so much. Maybe, they don't want him to be so, suffering so much and so ill. Alas, to judge from the gloom and terror in the depth of the poor minister's eyes, the battle was a sore one, and the victory anything but secure. So, of course, the Puritans, so focused on religion, turned this into a devil-God sort of battle, and Dimmesdale and Chillingworth are smack in the middle of it.